All right, this evening we're meeting with Blair Schulman, and Blair knows my wife better than he knows me, or better than I know. He's luckier that way, better than I know him. So Blair, you are in Kansas City, and you are an arts writer, correct?
Yes, that's right. I write about all the visual arts here in town, and I've done it for about 10 years, even before I moved here to Kansas City from New York.
So, all right, wait a minute. Let's go back outwards. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in New York City, where I was exposed to a lot of art, but I wasn't writing about it. So I came to Kansas City, where I had a great opportunity to discuss it. I didn't think there were a lot of outlets to discuss the art scene, which has started to grow in the last decade exponentially. It's been really quite a thing to see.
And I saw it as ton, man, and mostly in the last decade, probably singularly because you arrived.
Oh, sure, why not?
When you were younger, did you think you were going to grow up to be an artist?
No. Well, no, I take that back. I was an artist. I was a failed artist. I did go to school. I was going to School of Visual Arts for a while. Then my family moved us out of the city. I had a very good friend, Glenn Walk, who's a painter, and he was always slightly better than I was. So I've always felt like I was following him, so I kind of gave up. I thought, all right, well, he can paint better than I can, but I can certainly write a sentence better than he can. So we kind of called it a draw, and we're still friends.
That's cool. So, and what drew you to Kansas City as opposed to Tucumcari, New Mexico?
Well, I think you know the obvious answer is love. I met somebody in New York who had a place in Kansas City, who's great friends with Amy, and we moved to Kansas City, and I just decided, all my friends were leaving New York. It was not a lot of fun after 9/11, and Giuliani came into office, and I think that really affected the culture in a very significant way. And I wanted to go to a place like Kansas City where it was still being run pretty fast and loose. This is a very DIY culture here. If you want to do something, you go ahead and do it, and you don't think twice about it.
I remember being in Kansas City not that long ago, and somebody pointed out to me that Kansas City is the furthest west town that looks east.
Yes. The architecture...
Louis is the furthest east town that looks west.
It's the gate. I think they call St. Louis the gateway to the west, but I think architecturally it's Kansas City because it's kind of a melange of southwestern architecture and Chicago and Baltimore. I think you can see a little bit of everything here, but it's very. It has a southern vibe. It's Midwestern in spirit, but it also has a very southern vibe. People here are very polite and very, very kind. It's coming from New York where everybody was snappish and horrible and trying to chop your head off. It was quite a relief.
Do you find that people in Kansas City accept you as a Kansas Citian now?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. It took me a while. Let me go backwards for a second. I had been writing about Kansas City artists when I was still living in New York and writing about New York things also for a great publisher named Mike Miller who founded a magazine called Review. So I had a familiarity with Kansas City for a long time before I actually lived here. But I think the thing that enabled me that immersed myself with the community was that I got involved. I became very, very engaged with what was going on. Like I said, I saw this as a great opportunity to see something moving forward, and I really wanted to be a part of it, and I was, and everybody welcomed me.
Who do you write for?
I edit a website called Cupcakes and Regalia, and I also contribute to the sister website called Art Tattler. I contribute to Juxtapose online. Ceramics, Art, and Perception is another magazine. And I have something I just submitted to another magazine in New York, but I'm waiting for it to be accepted, so I won't say who it is just yet. So, and I travel and I write for galleries here and there. I just got back from Rochester, and I wrote about ceramicist named Henny Lynn Yelberg at the Rochester Art Center there.
How much of your writing is about Kansas City?
I would say 90% of it. I would say almost all.
Are you getting paid by most of these venues that you write for?
You know, funnily enough, I'm not getting paid by Cupcakes, but the thing about it is that we're not surrounded by advertising. Mike is very old school, lets me write whatever the hell I please, and it allows me to not be encumbered by someone paying the freight, so I can do and say what I please. And it's quite nice. It's very liberating to not worry about pissing off an advertiser, which I think is a problem in print media. So I think I'm at an advantage there.
It can be really weird, you know, because I mean, I write my art letter and then I submit the same thing in the Huffington Post, and every once in a while they edit the shit out of it, and I'm just going, what the fuck?
Well,
And you know, and most of the time they don't do anything.
yeah, I have copy editors who look at my stuff to make sure my grammar is okay. But in terms of content, I submit it to my publisher. Sometimes we'll talk about it. 9 times out of 10, he'll just publish it. He trusts me. We certainly have had discussions ex post facto. Maybe I should have done something differently, but he pretty much leaves me to my own devices.
Okay, so who determines what you write about?
Say that again, please.
What you write about? How is it chosen?
I just decide I want to write about it. I'm interested in an artist. I spend a lot of time with artists. I think and Gail really pointed that out also, which I thought was great. I spend a lot of time in artist studios. I love to see what everybody's doing. I love to watch process. I love to see the trajectory of someone's work. And through the course of the conversation, I find out someone's having a show, and I think it's interesting. I think they're doing something that ought to be discussed, and I discuss it. I don't really map it out very far in advance.
Are you almost only writing about exhibits?
Yes, pretty much. Yes. I would say about virtually everything is exhibition-based. It's about a current show in progress. And
from the time you see first of all, most of the gallery shows you're seeing last 4 or 5 weeks. Is that right?
That's about right. Yeah. And I try to go for the opening, or better still, I like to see before it's open. But that doesn't always happen because I think, as you know, artists don't show up until the last minute, the Thursday before the Friday opening, with all their work ready to be hung up.
Yeah.
So,
how long does it take? All right, so you see the show. What days are openings in Kansas City?
Friday. We have first Friday. Now it's second Friday, third Friday, fourth Friday. There's something to do every single weekend here. First Friday is the very big night out where everybody comes in from the suburbs and they go down. There's an area in Kansas City called the Crossroads, which is a kind of large district where you can park your car and go on foot and gallery hop and go shopping. And it's where you get your training wheels. You go there to kind of go hang out with your friends and go drink boxed wine. But if you really want to go see the work, then you go on Saturday. And other shows that are not on First Friday, they're usually the ones for the people that are kind of in the know, who really know we should go see that work. It won't be so crushing. You can actually stand around and look at the work and talk to people and not be jostled by suburbanites who really aren't there to look at the work, but just to be out for a night.
All right, so let's say you see the show Thursday, Friday, Saturday. When does your article show up?
Probably a week to 10 days later. It depends. It depends on how much editing I have to do, how quickly I get images from the artist. I'm very proactive about that. Once I decide I'm writing it, I contact the artist. If I have a couple of questions, I'll ask them, but usually I don't. But the one thing I do want is images right away. And if I don't get it from them, I'll go to the galleris and get it from the galleris. They're usually better about that than the artists are. Artists are great at making art, but keeping their business straight is another story sometimes.
Let's talk about the Kansas City art scene for a moment. My sense is that Kansas City artists are pretty supportive of one another and show up for each other's events.
Absolutely, absolutely. I call it a a horizontal city. Everybody stands alongside one another. I think the ideal is if it's good for you, it's good for me too. So everybody's looking out for one another. There is a lot of camaraderie, and you see a lot of fellow artists at their friends' exhibits.
I think that's really nice. How about the museums? Are they involved?
The museums are great. There's 3 museums. There's the Nelson Atkins, which has a new director, Julian something or other, from the Musée de Barrio in New York. And the Kemper, who I'm not sure, I think it's run by one of the Kemper. No, I take that back. It's run by someone else. And then there's the Nerman Museum in Johnson County, run by Bruce Hartman. And that's probably, of the 3, the most outstanding forward-thinking gallery in the area. The work there is it's all contemporary work, and it's really quite outstanding.
There's a fair amount of wealthy people involved in the arts in Kansas City, but are they getting down to the local artists, or are they just short?
Yes and no. You're right. The money is there. They're not handing the money off to people. I think there's a lot of reliance on private funding. There's something here called the Charlotte Street Foundation, which is started by David Hughes about, I think 15 years ago. They give out a lot of money to a lot of people, and they spread themselves out very nicely, so everybody has an opportunity. Every artist has an opportunity, but I don't see a lot of patronage from a lot of the wealthier people. Although there is Grand Arts, which is an exhibition space, which is run by Margaret Silva, who happens to be a Hallmark. If you guys don't know, Kansas City is Hallmark and H&R Block, so we have museums with both those names on it.
Right. My question disappeared. You know what? I don't know.
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, a lot of people, they look for the funding, but also it's a very DIY culture. If somebody wants to, a lot of the people went to the Kansas City Art Institute, which is an excellent school, and they're all very handy. A lot of them do their own framing and printing and firing and whatever discipline that they're involved in. They pretty much do it themselves. So when it's time to put on a show, they just go out there and they can just pretty much hang it themselves. And everybody really does everything on their own, which is quite nice.
Let's talk a moment about morality. What's stopping you from writing every article you write about the same artist?
I think there's plenty of artists for me that I don't have to do that. In fact, I make it a point to not write about somebody more than twice a year, and really only twice a year, unless they're doing something outstanding that needs 2 discussions. Otherwise, I look for someone new to write about. I think that's important, that you get the attention. It's encouraging for the artist. It's good for the community if there's a lot to talk about. Otherwise, the people who are reading it will say, well, Christ, there's only 30 artists in this freaking city, and there's not.
So where do you draw the line? I mean, like, some artists that you write about, you must absolutely love their work.
That's true. I do. And I really enjoy them, and I'll visit their shows, and I'll go to their studios, and I'll hang out with them. And there are some that I like them, and I don't like their work, and I say so in Cupcakes. And, you know, I kind of worry about what's going to happen when I see them at the next opening. They're going to throw a beer in my face. I've had a few encounters with some people, but for the most part, I think they're just appreciative that they're being discussed in a critical setting at all. So, you know, it's all fair.
Do you have an agenda? I mean, do you try and write, oh, I wrote about 2 men last time, I better write about a female this time, or I wrote about so many straight people, I better write about someone who's queer, or...
It's really funny you say that, because I do keep that in mind, that I try to keep a balance between male and female artists, because I want to ensure that everybody's getting discussed. And that also helps me to think about, well, who am I not paying attention to? In addition to my writing, I also have a radio program on a local broadcast, KKFI. It's called Art Speak Radio once a month. And that I'm very particular. I do split 1 month of female, 1 month of male, etc. As far as queer art, there's not so much queer art, although I think that's going to change because Danny Orendorff from Chicago is coming down to be a curator in residence at the Charlotte Street Foundation this year. So that'll be very interesting to see what he does.
So basically, I mean, this is the sense that I'm getting. It's pretty much up to you.
Yes.
What you write about, who you're going to write about, how nice or not nice you're going to be, how many words you're going to write. It's pretty much up to you.
It is up to me. I do decide what I want to do. I do talk about it with my publisher. I am rarely obnoxious about someone's work. I feel the most important thing, if you're going to be critical, is that you have to be constructive. Even if I like something, I don't want to gush so much and be orgasmic about it. I can certainly enjoy it, but I really want the readers to get a sense of what this person's about. I want them to understand why they're in their studio all day doing what it is that they do. So I try to be very conscious of how I'm portraying these people.
How worried are you about your livelihood?
Sorry?
How worried are you about your livelihood?
I have a day job that pays for this. So, you know, my day job pays the freight to take care of this, so I can go out and do everything. So I work 8 hours a day, and then I go and I work for another 3 or 4 or 5 hours in the evenings. And on the weekends, my whole social life is directed around the art scene. So that's pretty much what I do. So basically, I have my life. What's that?
You take vacations?
If I go on vacation, I go someplace where I can go look at art.
Yep. And does your day job get in the way of your brain, or does it play into it? Is it arts related?
No, absolutely not. I work at a hospital. I'm an administrator at a hospital in a very busy division. They're very accepting of what I do. I don't want it. When I need to take time off to go do my art stuff, I can give them a lot of advance notice to let them know that I'm going to be off in 2 weeks to go do something. In that sense, as long as I'm available and I'm present and I do what I'm supposed to do, they don't really. They actually kind of like it. They think it's very interesting what I'm doing because again, it's very community driven.
How much are you doing outside Kansas City?
Not as much as I'd like. I think the last time I was, like I said, I was in Rochester, Minnesota in April, and the thing that I just talked about just got published last week. I was in a fellowship in Oklahoma in 2012 with myself and another art writer and another artist. It was called the Oklahoma Art Writing and Curatorial Fellowship. And we would have to go to Oklahoma City about 7 times a year, 7 times during 2012. And it would be an intensive workshop where we'd meet a lot of arts professionals, not so many artists, but like I said to you the other day, Hamza Walker was there. There were Sylvie Fortin was there, and they talk about the business of art. You have to pay attention to the business aspect of it. It's one thing to be in your studio, but that's making the work is only half of the job. The other half is to make someone stand in front of it. And I think you have to be a pretty savvy business person to get people to do that.
How do artists get on your radar? How do you? I mean, are these mostly people you hang out with, and then you see their show, or
they introduce themselves to me. They come up to me at openings. I meet them at parties. They send me cold emails. I get a lot of emails from a lot of people. Come to my show. Come to my show. Or better still, come to my studio. I would much rather go to your studio first and hang out with you and kind of get to know you a little bit. Before I decide I'm going to go to your show. It goes back and forth, but I'm pretty available. If you want to meet me, I can be found.
What's the relationship between somebody's personality and their artwork?
I see that a lot of artists, their personality is very true to the work that they're making, and if it isn't, I call bullshit on it, because don't do something that you think we want to see. I want to know why, and that's also why I go to their studios, so I can see how fast my bullshit meter is quivering. You know, why are you doing this? I want to know your backstory. I want to know where you're from, and you know, why are you making this? How does this? Why is this a part of your life? So I would say in Kansas City, at least, people are pretty forthright about the work that they're making in relation to their own personalities.
So you do a fair number of studio. It sounds like you do as many studio visits as you do gallery visits, maybe more.
Yeah. I would say it's a 50-50. I go to a gallery opening or a show at least once a week, so I probably visit about 15 to 20 galleries a month. Sometimes I'll go back to something twice if I really like it, and I'll make maybe 4 or 5 or 6 studio visits, because I really hang out for a while. You know, we'll drink a beer or whatever and just hang out and chat. So yeah, I spend a lot of time with them.
But mostly you're writing about gallery shows. You're not writing about studio visits per se, are you?
I'm not. There are other people who do that. There's a couple of other small publications where people do talk about studio visits, and I leave them to it. I want to create a critical conversation about someone's work, and it allows them an opportunity to have something in their portfolio, so that if they are ready to get the next show or leave Kansas City, and Kansas City has its limits, and I think you do very, very well here if you pack up and go and show elsewhere and come back here. Just stay here only in Kansas City alone, I think, is not enough. I think you have to create your own exposure. I would like to flatter myself and say that sometimes my writing helps with that encouragement, but mostly they know what their trajectory is and what they have to do.
I don't see you writing very often about museum shows. Is that right?
That's true. I don't. The last museum show I think I wrote about was a Picasso exhibit at the Nelson that I really, really fucking hated. It actually pissed me off. It was a lot of photographs of this guy, I forgot his name. He's friends with Robert Capra, and he went to Picasso's studio at Cannes, La California, and it was all photographs of supposedly impromptu photographs, which I think is bullshit also. And there were only 4 pieces of actual Picasso artwork there. And I know that they weren't stressing it, but they were playing it up as a Picasso show. And there were 3 paintings and 1 vase, and that was it. And I thought, wow, what a jip! They made such a big thing about it. So I called them out on it.
Well, why are you writing about museums less, per se?
Just because their exhibits last longer. So if I do, I may only write about them once a year, because their new exhibits that I want to talk about could be up for 4 or 5 or 6 months, or sometimes even a year. Brad Kohlheimer's there. They have an exhibit of his work right now, and he'll be up there for a few months. The last time I think I talked about something at the Nerman was Rashon Griffin, and that was probably 2 years ago. He's a Kansas City artist, but he's also based out of New York. He was part of the Studio Museum of Harlem with Thelma Golden. So I wrote about that. I don't write a lot of museum shows. You're right, I don't, and I think it's because I have a closer relationship with the individual artists. I'm more interested in watching what they're doing.
Well, it's kind of like you're interested in making a difference to actual human beings as opposed to an institution, and you're writing to a larger extent for the person exhibiting than for the person reading the article.
I want the person reading the article to be aware that Kansas City has dozens upon dozens of artists, all of whom are in different stages of their career, and they're all worthy of at least one look. This is not a collector city. This is very much an exhibition city, where they don't worry about selling as much as they worry about showing. So I think that's why it's also important that you want to start discussing. You want to start discussing the artists to kind of give them a leg up so that they can to enhance their own body of work as well as the community that's supporting them so well.
I've been wanting to do a webinar with Peregrine Honig for a while, and I'm sort of curious about what's happened since she went off and became famous and came back home. And for those, there was a show, for those of you who don't know, that Jerry Saltz was on, and Simone de Curie, and the next great work of art, where they would have, like Project Runway, have artists making, have 48 hours or less to create a masterpiece, and then get juried. And some of the artists had talent, and a lot of them didn't. And Peregrine Honig, who's a wonderful artist from Kansas City, was on the show and didn't win. But, many smart people thought she should have. Those of us who admittedly watched the show.
We all thought she was going to watch it, but I think the theory was it might have been a kiss of death had she won all that money, whereas the young man who did Farah Abdi or something like that, he's taken the money and he lives in another place and he's just focusing and making his work. Peregrine's a really, really smart and talented individual, and she's also a very savvy businesswoman. She owns her own business, and she's very, very successful with it. She is I would say she's a very important person in the city, and she actually just contributed something to Cupcakes and Regalia last week for me. We talked about the Lucian Smith show, this artist from LA. Or Kentucky, excuse me, who's showing in LA. She would be a lot of fun to participate in this. She's excellent to speak to.
How the city responded to her, prodigal daughter-ness?
How they responded to what?
Her prodigal daughter-ness.
That's exactly right. They love her. When she got on the show, they talked about it. While she was on the show, they talked about it. When she lost the show, they talked about it. They were just so proud of her. It's great. Kansas City is working very, very diligently to not be considered a flyover city. We are very much a destination for artists, both to live and make work and for people to come and see art. And having someone like Peregrine on in our city, it's very helpful to all of us.
What does the city do to not be a flyover? Because, I think Kansas City, I have mixed feelings about how well they're doing with that.
Well, we have a lot of space. We have a lot of artists. We have a lot of very, very cheap living space and a lot of cheap studio space. So there's lots of galleries, but they're not the traditional white cube galleries. There's very few of those. There's a good number, but there's more pop-up galleries than anything else. There's a lot of artist-run spaces here, and I think there's a generational pull. A lot of younger people decide that they like it here so much, they're staying, but what are we going to do to make sure that everybody comes to visit us from around the world? So they're really taking the bull by the horns and making things happen. There's a group of artists, and they started something called Torte Projects, right around the corner from the Dolphin Gallery, which after 25 years just closed. And so it's 5 artists, and they rented a space, and in between their exhibitions, they have lots of programming. And there's always something to do there every single weekend. In fact, they have something called Crit Night. When they take down an exhibition, they'll invite 3 artists to come into the gallery, hang the work that they're working on, and they'll have a moderator discuss their work, and the public is invited. So it's like a studio visit with 30 strangers in the gallery, and it's quite great. I moderated it for the first year, and this is their second year. They just finished. Somebody else is doing it, and now they're going into their third year of it, and I think it's a really great thing. So it's programming like that that I think keeps people interested and wants them to come here, and I think I think those are the things that make Kansas City a draw.
You know, I think it's interesting. I think most art critics stand aside. You know, they perceive the community that they exist in, but they're not an integral part of it. And I feel like to a much greater extent you are an integral part of the Kansas City art community.
Well, I think you're right. I think you can't live, I think it's very difficult to live in a city like Kansas City and not be engaged. It isn't like New York, where you can maintain a specter of anonymity, where you're totally on your own and you're the shadowy figure. I don't want to do it that way. Kansas City doesn't embrace me that way. They're very accepting of the way I discuss people and discuss the work, and I feel like I'm a part of making Kansas City something to discuss and visit.
Why don't some of you guys have questions, ask those questions, or raise your hands, and I'll get you like in a second. Do you feel like, do you try to write positive reviews about people's shows, or do you, I mean, like I write, and every time I start getting negative, I sort of like go, oh, how I might hurt that person's feelings. And, you know, and then sometimes I do it anyway and I get sued, or I don't do it, which I had. You know, I mean, like, how do you find the balance?
Well, like I said earlier, I just try to be constructive. I think it's okay if I say I don't like someone's work, but I have to be very clear why I don't like it. And I'm of the opinion if you're making something and you're presenting something, first of all, if it's not a good show, I blame the curator and not the artist, because it's their responsibility to see that this work is not ready to be exhibited. And two, if the artist is ready to show it, they feel it's the best thing that they're doing right now, and they're ready to show it. And I want to take all that into consideration. I don't necessarily have to agree with it. I wrote about someone named Anthony Bob at Grand Arts a few months ago. I didn't like his work, but I understood why it was so good. It was beautifully done. It just wasn't something I liked. But that's okay. I can say I don't like it and say why I don't like it, but I can't deny the fact that it was very well done. And there have been times when I've seen other artists' work where I don't think it was well done, and I said so.
I have another question. I'm going to go to Lila first. Lila, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Blair, for being with us. I really appreciate it. I've got 3 questions, one personal, one Kansas City, and one more national. May I ask all of them or one of them, whichever works for you?
Ask them one at a time, okay?
All right.
Ask them one at a time.
Let me start with a personal one, which is, in 25 years, when you look back at all of the art criticisms you've done, how will you know you've achieved your goal, or do you have sort of an art-related goal in life?
I do have a personal agenda. I'm seeking a more national audience. I write very locally, but I am also ambitious, to be perfectly blunt. I want to have a wider audience. I want more people to be reading me nationally. I pitch larger publications constantly, all the time. And sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. I'd like to think that my entire body of work is in support of a city that deserves to have that kind of support. This is my home, and I like to be a part of it, and I think it's worthy of discussion. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it.
Thank you.
Good point. Go ahead.
So keep going?
Yep.
My next one is Kansas City focused, and that how does Cupcakes and Regalia's role differ from Art Tattler versus Review? Well,
Review is defunct. It was founded by the same person, but it closed. It grew to a point that it kind of imploded and it stopped. Art Tattler started first, and over time, my publisher Mike Miller wanted to give it a more international focus. And if you look at Art Tattler, almost everything, it's 70% press releases of international and national exhibitions. And sometimes, depending on the artist that I write about, especially if I'm writing about a Kansas City artist with a national reputation or a visiting artist with a national reputation, it will go into Art Tattler. But review's been going for a long time, but Tattler is kind of more of the international, and Cupcakes is strictly for the Kansas City area. And when I say Kansas City, I also want to include Lawrence, Kansas, which is the home of KU, University of Kansas, which has the only MFA program in the region, by the way, which is unbelievable to me. I'm a big advocate for bringing an MFA program to Kansas City. I've been fighting that for a long time. That and decent public transportation.
Then when you're writing, and if you're trying to go more national, are you eager to get more work into Tattler, or that's just those opportunities just don't come up?
You know, I'll write something first. Mike will decide where it belongs. And if he thinks it goes into Tattler, that's okay by me. Now, I pitch a lot of national publications if there's an area artist that I think has a show that might have an interest to a national publication. And I'll do lots of pitches. And I'm sure all of you guys know that if you're, not getting rejected, you're not trying hard enough. So just keep getting rejected. It's okay. Something will stick eventually.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And then my last question is very little. I haven't read articles in your Cupcakes, but I've read some, and I really appreciate the level of criticism that you do offer. I think it's really unusual for my area, Washington, D.C., and I wondered in your travels and just general national awareness whether there are cupcake equivalents in D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia area.
Yeah, I think so. I have a really good friend in Baltimore, Jim Lucio. He runs Artscape, which is that annual street fair. And but before that, he was working at I guess the Baltimore equivalent to the Village Voice. I think there's a lot of smaller outlets. I want to say that it's sports, although they're dedicated in Chicago, but they speak a lot nationally and regionally about artists. I'm not very well acquainted with a lot of cupcake style publications like my own, but I'm sure they exist.
I think it's really unusual. So I haven't heard of them in the D.C. area, and I'd love to. You should franchise or something. I'm thinking about it. It all has to start paying me first. Sure. I'd like to be able to I'd like to quit my day job at some point. Yeah. Well, good luck. Thank you. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Susan Emerson, go ahead, Susan.
I just wondered if you yourself collect art, and how do you pick the artists that you collect, and are they people you've written about?
Thank you. That's a very good question. No, I don't collect the artists I write about, although they have given me work before after I've written about them, which means it'd probably be a long time before I write about them again. And you can't see behind me, I have a bunch of work from people who are friends. They're very well aware. I make it very, very clear that thank you for giving me something. Don't expect me to write about it. Don't expect me to write about you for doing that. You have some integrity. I won't even let people buy me a drink. I just won't do it. I do collect my own art. There's a lot of people in Kansas City whose work I would like to buy, but I don't for obvious reasons, or I can't afford them because they're doing really well. I like photographs. I like to collect photography. I have a lot of Terry Richardson photographs for some reason, of all people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Karen had a question. I'm going to go there. Karen, did you have a question? Your hand came down. Do you have one? And I want more people to ask questions. Karen, go ahead.
Mine's it's a very specific, selfish question.
That's fine. I'm a very selfish person.
Okay. I've been reading through your articles, and you write about artist Paul Anthony Smith.
Yes.
Okay. And I've been looking for an artist that I feel like I have something in common with. And his Mask series, can you tell me a little bit about them, just briefly?
Everything that he does, Paul is an outstanding artist, and I think of the handful of artists that I do talk about, he's probably he's developing a national reputation right now. He's very, very well received. It has nothing to do with anything I've written about him. He's an outstanding artist, very young. He's only 25, very focused. All his photographs are photographs of his family that he's collected for his entire life, or that he takes. He's Jamaican, grew up in Florida, and he's traveled to Haiti, and he's taken pictures of all of them. The Mask series, it's something he developed called picotage, where he uses a ceramic tool. He puts something over the photograph, and then he uses a ceramic tool to pick at it, and it creates this three-dimensional element, which is very interesting. But I've compared, and I know he does that just as an idea, as a thought, but I wanted to come up with a theory about it, and I compared him to Dean Artist, that his work really stands alone, and I think you're very well aware of everybody's status and stature when you look at his work.
Hold on, I muted Karen because there was noise. Yeah, Karen, you want to say more?
You?
Would you say thank you? Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Blair, you said something about him being an excellent artist, or a really good artist, or a talented artist, but he's still young. What is it that makes somebody how can you tell from their personality and or their art, what are the key ingredients to be, that makes you think they're going to be a successful artist?
You work, and you work, and you work, and you're ready. And you don't say, I'm about to start working on a new body of work. When you go to a gallery, you say, I have a new body of work. You come to my studio, I have another new body of work. This guy, he goes to a lot of residencies, and that's his time to really think about what his next ideas are, or to really put his ideas into praxis. You have to be prepared for the gallery to be interested, unless you're someone who's very, very well known and the gallerist trusts you and they're ready to take whatever it is you're going to give them. But you have to have a great body of work behind you. And Paul works very, very hard. I go to his studio and there is just stuff everywhere. It's amazing. And I can't say that about a lot of artists.
Okay. James, go ahead.
I have a question about you seem to have a lot of connections with artists. Have any curators approached you to pick your brain about artists, or have you done any curation yourself?
Yeah, and I've curated a couple of things, not many. But yeah, curators talk to me, what do you think? But they don't, I think they ask me in the course of a regular social conversation. I've not been asked particularly when looking for an artist, if they're looking to exhibit somebody, or if they are, I'm not aware of it. I think my interaction with curators are pretty much on a social level, or if I'm going to visit a show, but I'm not specifically asked about artists, unless it's just a general opinion.
Where would you like to see your career go?
I'd like to have a bigger national following. I'd like to be, to be honest with you, I pitched the big three, Art in America, Art News, Art Forum, pitch them all the time. I'd like to get something in there. I'd like to have I'd like to write a book. I'd like to write a couple of books about some artists. I'd like a more national reputation. I think that's what my agenda is. And I'd like it to stem from what I'm learning here and experiencing here in Kansas City.
Does Art in America have somebody cover Kansas City?
I think Alice Thorson, who is the chief art critic for the Kansas City Star. I think when they do want something, it's she who does it. So Alice is the grande dame of art criticism in Kansas City, and well deserved. She's earned that title, I think. I mean, I don't know if you know her from New Art Examiner. Yeah. So,
a while ago.
yeah.
What about Art Limited? Do they cover Kansas City?
You know what? They don't. They really don't. They really don't. Art News will sometimes do it. They may ask one of their own writers to do it. So I don't know if it's me, if they don't care for my writing, or they're not interested in what I'm pitching them. I try to think it's the latter and not the former.
Of course.
So,
have you sent things to Art Limited?
What's that?
Have you sent things? Have you pitched Art Limited?
No, I don't even know who that is.
It's a magazine out of Los Angeles that in the last 12 months has started covering the Midwest.
No, but I'll look them up. I mean, I know High Fructose, and you know, Juxtapose is in San Francisco.
Art Limited has a physical print publication and an internet presence.
Wow.
Take a look at them, and when you're ready, I'll make an introduction.
I would love that. Thank you. Yeah, you know, it's funny that a lot of the younger artists really miss print media. The return of the zine is here. Although people like to read their things online because there's an immediacy, people really are very active in seeing their art talked about in the Kansas City Star or the Pitch, which is the Village Voice of Kansas City. It's all owned by Village Voice Media. People really, really like print media still. It's something that it won't go away for another generation or two. And in fact, I think it's making a comeback in a very strong way. So, and for myself, I also like to...
In which way as pertains to art criticism? Which way is it making a comeback?
I think people still have the same... I think people still have a standing respect for print media and what it does. To physically hold something in your hand is really... It's not so virtual. It's one thing to share links on Facebook, but it's another thing to have a tear sheet and put it in your portfolio when you show your art or when you pitch your stories. Yeah, there's a legitimacy to that is deserved, and it's moving away and coming back.
But you think it's making a comeback?
I think it's, I wouldn't say it's making a comeback as much as that it's understanding its place in new media society. I think the print people understand that there is a hunger for print media, and you can do both. But you can't, I think those who are one or the other, they have trouble. I think you can cross both if you can be print and media and virtual.
No, that's true. Who else has got questions? Anybody who could wrap it up? Who's got more questions? Elizabeth, go ahead.
Blair, thanks for joining us tonight. I don't really know exactly what I want to ask, other than saying that I lived in Kansas City for 7 years, and I moved up to Detroit to go to grad school. Then I moved to Brooklyn and came back to Detroit, seeking the community that I had in Kansas City, the support, the constant engagement with other artists. I don't know. There's no place like Kansas City, and I miss it so much. And I constantly am debating whether or not I should move back there. But
I think you should. Although Detroit probably needs you more than ever right now.
I know, and that's
And I think that's an opportunity. I think that's an amazing opportunity for the city right now. I kind of love that everybody wanted Peter Shedjall's head for saying that Dia should sell their collection. Everybody just wanted to murder him. I've always thought that Detroit, even before they filed for bankruptcy, it feels like Kansas City was a decade ago. There's this abundance of space and opportunity, and there's nobody telling you no.
Very true.
And that's what it's like in Kansas City. There's very few people here that tell you, no, you can't do it. Everybody's like, fuck you, I do what I want. And they do. And there's a lot of people that want to have a gallery, and they have a gallery, and it's in the West Bottoms. The West Bottoms is hopping now. I mean, for those who don't know, the West Bottoms is the industrial area of Kansas City, and it's really get down and pretty dangerous, and you don't walk around there, you know, unescorted or not close to your car. But there's galleries everywhere, and it's amazing, and there's some really good work there, and it's the opposite of the white cube, and I'm not a big proponent of the white cube space. I feel it's very old-fashioned. It has its place and it's fine, but it's more exciting to walk into some get-down little gallery and see some great work that fits along these walls. And it's about having an experience, and that's what the genesis of all my work is. It's about having an experience. You know, don't ask me what I think of the show the night I'm looking at it. Ask me 2 days later what I think about it, and that'll really tell you how it is. So I think Kansas City and Detroit, I think they're kind of kindred spirits. But, you know, if you don't want to do it there, come back here. There's certainly, it's still affordable here.
So, like, you don't think it would be a bad idea, I don't know, like I'm exhibiting, I'm like starting to sell work. Do you think it would be like a backwards move for me to like come back to Kansas City after a, 5-year hiatus of being gone?
No, just the opposite. I think people really welcome you, especially if you've gone off and done something on your own that's different. People like to, it's good to have the air of arrival rather than departure. When you say you're leaving, people are like, okay, goodbye, go. But when you come back, everybody's like, tell me everything. What's going on? What are you doing? And we're so glad you're here because you chose to come back. So one must always have the air of arrival. And that's a good thing.
I hear you talking about Peregrine and Paul, and I'm like, oh, my buddies. Like, I'm so proud of them, and like, I don't know.
They work really hard, but are you having fun in Detroit?
Yes, it's been like really, I'm really glad that I came back here, and like things are good, and space is affordable, and have like a new studio practice. So like, it's good, and it's on levels, there are certain levels where it's like equal of Kansas City. I guess I just really miss like the taste and vibe that isn't here.
Well,
but
if you have a community of people there, then you can blow it up the same way that it's happening here also. And I think I think that's a really good opportunity. Or try to do something with us in Kansas City. I'd love to see artists switching back and forth. We do that a lot. We visit lots of other cities, and I don't hear a lot with Detroit. So I would like to see some synergy between our two cities. That would be very, very nice.
Okay,
so,
I'm going to email you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you're much more engaged, Blair, than most art critics, and you're a bigger advocate for your city than most art critics are for theirs.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was interviewing David Ford, who's a pretty well-known mid-career artist in Kansas City. He shows pretty internationally and nationally. And he was the article I wrote about for that other magazine that I'm waiting to hear about. I spent 3.5 hours in the studio last week. We were just, you know, hanging out and talking and talking and talking. And he said, this is probably the longest time that some art writers ever spent with my work in so many years. And I thought, well, that's too bad because I'm having a really good time.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's like it's a night out. It's so great. I mean, you're not just hanging out and watching television. You're hanging out and watching someone do something that they love, and it's very, very exciting. And to be involved in that it's great. I'm very lucky in a lot of ways.
Are all of you guys noticing the same things I'm noticing, you know, like the people we've spoken with tonight and over the period of the course, that all of these folks are excited about artists? You know, a lot of them started off as artists but couldn't continue as artists or chose not to continue as artists, but they all totally believe in artists. And you keep hearing about, you know, from curators and writers and art dealers talking about how artists get on their radar from other artists. You know, it all comes back to the art and the artist, and that everybody believes in what you guys are creating and doing. And, you know, it's all about you. It's really fascinating. So, Blair, thank you for joining us. Thank you for adding your opinion to this dialogue and, you know, echoing and, you know, some of the things that we've been hearing.
Thank you. I'm very flattered. And anybody can find me. You can email me, and I'll happy to reply. I do that all the time, so please do.
What email address do you want people to send stuff to?
info@blairschulman.com.
info@blairschulman.com. And how many guest rooms do you have?
Huh?
How many guest rooms?
Guest rooms? I have plenty, and I can certainly find you a place to crash also. We can go to Adam Jones's house down the street. He's got a big house.
You know, speaking of which, that reminds me of another thing. Blair, thank you. The Chicago Art Expo Chicago is the weekend of September 21st. And a number of you have written about, asking me about hotels. And I've lost some of those emails. I know I lost somebody. But, you know, hopefully people in Chicago would put you up. And maybe I'll send out an email about this tonight. But if you're interested in putting somebody up, let me know. If you're interested in somebody putting you up, let me know. Let me see if I can match people, or you can, you know, go ahead and pursue it directly. But part of what we're trying to do here, you know, is grow a community and make all these things happen. So let's do that. I think Blair has turned his TV off, or maybe signed off. For people going to the thing on Wednesday, I'll send you that. I'll send that tomorrow, and I look forward to seeing you all. Everybody, thanks so much. Good night. Bye-bye. Let me unmute you all, too.